Greetings, Father Henry from St. John's, and I would like to chat with you a bit about serving on the vestry. Um, a, a, a view probably at about 5,000 feet of what it means to serve on the vestry, and I appreciate you taking time to watch this, whether you are now discerning a call to vestry or whether you've already been elected to vestry and now you want to know exactly what's next. But the role of vestry remains somewhat constant and defined. And that's what I want to discuss today, just to give you some guidelines and some information of how to go forward as a vestry member. There is a essentially business aspect to serving on vestry, and that's where most people's minds go immediately. But ultimately, and I think probably more importantly, this is a sacred ministry. This is important to think of this as a ministry. Vestry is a calling. Moses couldn't do everything by himself. And he said, God, I can't do this. What's up? And God said, oh, get 70 elders together and we will get them all working with you and we will spread the workload. And that's what they did. Now, I'm not Moses, and there are only 9 of you, not 70, but I think you get the point. This is a calling, this is a ministry. And as such, some of your best tools are discernment and prayer. Yes, we will look at spreadsheets of financial analysis. We'll talk strategic planning. But discernment and prayer are really going to be your core tools. And with that, I want to start with the Book of Common Prayer, because that's an important part. And I'm going to go back to our catechism, which is a wonderful set of what's going on in the church, sort of FAQs. And on page 855, it talks about what is the mission of the church. It's a question and answer section in the catechism. And it says, what is the mission of the church? The mission of the church is to restore all people to unity with God and each other in Christ. And how does the church pursue its mission? The church pursues its mission as it prays and worships, proclaims the gospel, and promotes justice, peace, and love. Through whom does the church carry out its mission? The church carries out its mission through the ministry of all its members. And there's the core of being a vestry. This is what the mission of the church is, and this is the foundation of the ministry of vestry. The other piece that I want to refer you to is our baptismal covenant. And I am now turning to page 305, where we get to the final questions in the baptismal covenant. The beginning is talking about the creed and our beliefs, but then it says, will you proclaim by word and example the good news of God in Christ? And we respond, I will with God's help. Will you seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving your neighbor as yourself? I will, with God's help. Will you strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being? I will, with God's help. Those questions and that foundation of what is the mission of the church is what drives the work of vestry. And that's why I say it's a sacred ministry. And that, with prayer and discernment, makes us an effective and Christ-led ministry and an effective and Christ-led vestry. And that's important. The nuts and bolts of vestry, that's the next topic. What is the role? Property management, the fiduciary responsibility, human resource planning, stewardship, and then ministry liaison roles. That's the part most people think of, and that's very important, but its foundation lies in being a ministry. So Vestry looks over, broadly speaking, the business affairs of the church. As I said, property management, fiduciary responsibility, notes and obligations, financial analysis, that's all responsibility of the vestry. The human resource planning, our staffing, our employee handbooks, all of those things, responsibility of the vestry. Stewardship, raising the funds for which we care for as part of our ministry. And then the liaison roles of the various ministries. As a vestry member, you will have a liaison role. That doesn't mean you do that ministry. You're not in charge of that ministry. You're the liaison. You should be deeply and intimately involved with and understand with that, what is that ministry and what their concerns are. If you're worship, that's a broad spectrum of the lectors and altar guild and many other sub-ministries. But when we're talking in vestry and a topic comes up, you should be able to say, that's going to affect worship. And this person might need to be involved, or this will affect it in this way. And you become that communication piece. If you're the outreach person for the ministry liaison, that's your communication piece. All of these will be broken out for each person, but you become that focus in that little segment of our ministries and become the voice for that area on the vestry, so that the concerns are heard, so that your radar goes off if something we're talking about is going to affect that area of the church. And then we can see that everything is accounted for as best as we can. So you become a communication piece for those ministries, and that's the important role. There are a few details around here, and I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. The specifics we can talk about in other forums. Safe church training is required. This can be classroom or this can be online training. And safe church training allows us all to see and recognize when an adult or a child is in an unsafe situation. It has a large focus on child abuse, as it should, but it does pertain to other abuses that can happen in an organization. And this safe church training helps attune all of our senses to what is a safe and unsafe environment, what's a safe and unsafe situation, so that we can make good, clean, proper decisions going forward. So we will make arrangements for you to get that training. The vestry meeting, we meet monthly. Sometimes in the summer we take a month or two off. But typically we meet the third Wednesday of each month at 6:30 p.m. There's a caveat to that. Holidays in November and December, Thanksgiving and Christmas, sometimes those meetings move a week or two either direction, so as not to interfere with holidays and family time. And then during Lent, we typically offer evening prayer and a soup and bread supper on Wednesday nights. So we will generally move vestry meetings to Tuesday during Lent. Prior to the meeting, you should receive all the reports and the agenda. They will be placed in a Dropbox that you'll have access to. And it's expected that you've read the reports and read the agenda and have an understanding going into the meeting of what's going to be discussed, so that we don't have to hash through all of that. we all want to show up prepared so we can use our time together more effectively. For instance, I will each month issue a rector's report. I try to my best ability to keep it to one page. But when it's time to talk about the rector's report, I want to know if you have questions, concerns, or comments. We're not going to read the rector's report. I will expect that everyone has already done that. And so we'll simply look for questions, comments, and concerns about it. And that's much more effective use of our time. Communication within the parish is very important. Our two main vehicles for communication are the Sunday Worship Bulletin and the Friday Bell Tower that goes out each via email. It is best if you have a piece for either of those that it gets into the office to our parish administrator by Tuesday morning, because we're working on those constantly. But if we have it by Tuesday morning, we know we can get it published in all of those various avenues. And one other duty that comes up for Vestry is that there will be a rota assigned where you will count the collection plate. Typically on Sunday there will be two of you. It's fairly straightforward process and it's detailed. But on a rotational basis, you will be assigned to work with another Vestry member and count the Sunday collection. That's the framework. Those are some of the details of the duties of Vestry, but also the foundation, the spiritual foundation and the ministry foundation that are so important. So ultimately, the Vestry is a partnership with the rector. We work together. There are canons, which are bylaws, essentially bylaws and canons that define our relationship, define what we can and can't do. And here I will say that if we get to the point of having to rely on the canons to settle a discussion, we've probably failed. And we need to go back to where we began this discussion, which is, what is the mission of the church and what are those core parts of our baptismal covenant? And if we stick with that, we then don't start arguing over, well, canon law says. That being the point, we still have canons to work with. And let me explain that a little bit. There's a hierarchy to the canons. The canons of the Episcopal Church take precedence over the canons of the diocese, which take precedence over the bylaws of the parish. They should all be in concord with one another, but that hierarchy has been established. Then there's also a hierarchy within the church. Historically, and this could be a whole video of its own, the Episcopal Church is a split off from the Anglican Church, the Church of England. And frankly, we were the Church of England prior to our little disagreement with King George in the 1770s. We were the Church of England here in the United States, or then the colonies. When that disagreement occurred and we split, the church leaders wanted to stay with what they knew and what they believed in, and they formed the Episcopal Church in the United States. And it became part of, and remains part of, the Anglican Communion, which is a worldwide communion. The Archbishop of Canterbury is the leader of the Anglican Communion, and he is an equal among equals. Not so much of an authoritarian figure as a leader among equals. The next layer below that are the presiding bishops and primates. In our own church polity, we have a presiding bishop. It is the equivalent, except for some minor legal definitions, of a primate. Other provinces will call it a primate. We call our spiritual leader, our presiding bishop. And as I make this video, it is Presiding Bishop Curry. And then under the bishop, under the presiding bishop, we have a series of ministries of bishops, priests, and deacons. As I started to say, we have 38 provinces in the Anglican Communion. The Episcopal Church has 9 provinces within the Episcopal Church. There are 110 dioceses, and we actually represent 10 different countries throughout the Episcopal Church. Now, the Episcopal Church foundation was occurring, its formation was occurring at the same time as the formation of the United States. And as a result, there is a great similarity. We have a president, and we have a Senate, which has 1 representative or 2 representatives per state, and then representatives of each state based on the size of them as members of Congress. So we have a president and a Senate and a Congress, and that becomes our government structure. The Episcopal Church has a similar structure. We have a presiding bishop. We have a house of bishops with the bishops of each diocese being represented, and we have a House of Commons. And in the House of Commons, we have a group of laity, and we have a group of clergy. And so we have the House of Bishops, House of Commons, which is much like our Senate and our Congress. And so it's a very, very similar and familiar structure. As we look at our own diocesan offerings, we have a diocesan bishop. And the diocesan bishop has a standing committee, which is to the diocesan bishop the equivalent of the vestry. Within the parish, we have a rector and a vestry. Within the diocese, we have the bishop and the standing committee. It's a similar relationship between those. That's a little bit of the structure just to give you a framework that we work under. Most of it will not be as important on a day-to-day basis. But the core thing is to look at our baptismal covenant before we look at our canons. And that will bring us a better sense of direction. Now, within the vestry, we have 2 wardens who are elected by the vestry to serve in a leadership role. And they serve with the treasurer and the registrar as part of the executive committee. Executive committee being the rector, the 2 wardens, the treasurer, and the registrar. Their role is defined by our bylaws. Mostly the role is that the executive committee will meet the week prior to a vestry meeting to have a general discussion of what's going on in the church and what do we need to make sure is on the agenda for the coming meeting. So we have multiple voices forming our agenda for the vestry meeting. And that seems to be a very good relationship. Now, the 2 wardens have similar roles. It's technically called a junior warden and a senior warden. Functionally, the senior warden is the rector's warden. They are charged with essentially watching over and caring for the rector. And the junior warden is the people's warden, who is charged with watching over and caring for the people of the parish. And that's a broad sense, but it's just their 2 foci. So one person is going to be focused on how's the rector doing, basically the welfare and the health of the rector as well as the effectiveness of the rector. And there becomes a very close relationship on there. And then the junior warden, the people's warden, keeping an overall eye look on the relationship with the congregation. So a piece that I want to share and stress with the formation of our church And this goes back prior to the formation of the Episcopal Church, but looking further back to the formation of the Anglican Communion and the Church of England. The Church of England and the Anglican Church, as we know it, are, for lack of a better term, our mother church, was formed out of conflict. It was a result of the Protestant Reformation. You've heard, or at least have a passing knowledge of Martin Luther nailing his 95 Theses to the door of the cathedral. He didn't wish to split from the Catholic Church. He wished to reform the Catholic Church. But what happened was there was a split. And in England, that split resulted in the Church of England. And when that split occurred, there was a lot of tension between those who felt the Protestant Reformation was the way to go and those who held on tight to the Catholic roots of the church. And that was a tension that went back and forth in the early years of the Anglican Church. And frankly, it went back and forth with each of Henry VIII's children, as one was Protestant and one was more Catholic. And so everything shifted back and forth. And it was a very tenuous time. But it was a time where we lived with that tension, and a time where we learned that, as it said, the church is a really big tent. The Episcopal Church and the Anglican Church is a really big tent, and there's room for people with many different opinions and views. So it's not that there's conflict, it's not that there's tension, it's how do we work with it and how do we live with it. And that's important. We were born out of that conflict. So conflict's normal. It's how we agree to live together that matters. And this is bringing us to another important role on the vestry. You are a leader in the church, and you're a visible leader on the church, not just with your picture on the bulletin board in the hallway, but you're a visible leader in the church. And so you will have parishioners who come to you and say, I have a concern. And what's important is to listen. Now, you are to bring other voices to the table. This is part of your role. Listening and bringing their concerns to the vestry, bringing their concerns to me. It depends on, that judgment call of what's needed. But there's a couple caveats that I want to help you with and get you a little further up the learning curve of how this can happen. Because churches, as dynamic organisms, have some nuances. You will have folks come to you who say, a lot of people say, ... or everyone wishes we would ... So a lot of people and everyone typically, not always, but typically means the person who's talking to you believes that. If someone comes to you and says, a lot of people, that's wonderful. I'd love to talk with them. Can you introduce me? Tell me who they are so I can talk to them as well. And generally, the a lot of people argument falls down to it's one person. Or it's two people. And let's talk to those two people. The concern is no less valid, but the weight may be different. It may not be 50 people. It may, and usually is, one person. So it's just a caveat of things to watch for. This other piece is helpful, and I will include some diagrams to help explain this, but we want to avoid triangles. Okay, so my conversation with you is a linear, straight conversation. And we're having a conversation, and we can get that nuance and understanding back and forth, as long as we both listen and we both hear each other. But there'll be times where, and it's often the rector, it can be the associate, it can be two other vestry members, it can be any mix of people, but there's often a time where someone tries to triangulate. And I may be having a conflict with person A, or they see a conversation with me as a conflict between us, and that's understandable, that happens. But then person A goes to you as a vestry member and says, this is happening, and I want you to go to the rector and talk to him. And we now have formed a triangle. They aren't helpful to form a triangle. And if someone tries to do that, one of the best things to do is say, I hear your concern, and I want to help with this situation. So why don't we go talk to the rector? Or why don't we go talk with the associate? Or why don't we go talk to that other member in the parish, that other vestry member with whom the conflict is? And collapse that triangle and get it back into a dialogue. Dialogues are good. Triangles, not good. So we try to avoid those. And there are people who will try to triangulate you, and it will frustrate you, and it will not benefit the situation. So something to be aware of. This whole part of bringing other voices to the table is an important part of being a vestry member. It's not the only part. It's not a burdensome part. It just is part of it. And really, you don't need to solve everyone's problems. You can't. I can't. We can't solve everyone's problems, but what we can do, and what you can explicitly do, is listen. In most cases, folks don't want us to solve a problem. Folks want to be heard, and that's really important. They want to be heard. They don't want the problem solved. They want to be heard. And so remember that. I hear your problem. Is there a way I can help you? Is there a way the church can help you? And they will usually come and say, here's what can help. Or, no, I just needed to be heard, and thank you. So you don't need to be a problem solver, but you do need to be a good listener. And I think that brings us back. We need to listen to the folks in the congregation, and we need to listen to God. What's God calling us, St. John's, to do and to be at the crossroads of Olney, Maryland? What is God calling us to do and to be as we sit as an important part of the crossroads of Olney, Maryland? What is our role? And we're going to have to listen for that with God. And then as a member of the vestry, we go forward and we make that ministry happen. The vestry is exciting. We have fun. We work hard. We enjoy each other's company. And some of your best and closest friends in the parish will be the folks you serve with on vestry. Thank you for serving. Thank you for being a part of St. John's. And God bless.